so much for coming to see this very special show. My name is Bill Meyer. I know most of you people out here, and I appreciate you all for coming to experience this unique event, because Paul Robeson cannot ever be forgotten. He is one of the most amazing American we ever had. So I just want to let you know that we want to thank the Carr Center for allowing us to use their facilities at the last minute, because this all is very quick, and you guys helped us out by coming here and buying tickets and being supportive. So we thank Oliver Ragsdale and the Carr Center and all the people who work here, and Lumumba and Raymond and Ryan. Thank you so much. Let's give them all a round. So there's two sponsors for this concert. It's the Michigan Peace Council, which some of you are members of, and if you're not, maybe you can consider being one. And the Justice for Keith Lamar campaign, which you'll learn more about in the program. Those two are the sponsors for this event. Back about 36 years ago, we did a Detroit tribute to Paul Robeson and his work for peace. And it was done by the U.S. Peace Council. And some of you who were here for that saw that show. And it was filmed. And it was a magnificent long production, 3 hours or so. And we had all the famous Detroiters being interviewed, talking about how much they love Paul Robeson. The program is available on YouTube, on our, I forget what channel it is, but just search for Paul Robeson, a Detroit tribute to Paul Robeson, you'll find it. But we also have one copy of DVD left, if anyone still has a DVD player. We got it out there. So that show was 36 years ago, and here it is so much later, and I'm doing a show again. And I'm so honored to do this with the gentleman who I'm going to introduce to you in a minute. First I want to say that we're going to hear about the Justice for Lamar campaign in the federal program also, so you'll learn more about that too. This gentleman that's going to be performing for you is in the United States from the United Kingdom, from Liverpool. Actually, he's a Nigerian. He was born in Nigeria, and he lives in England now, since he was 16 years old. And he first apparently became aware of Paul Robeson back in 1995, after we did our show in '87. And in 2008, he started traveling with the Robeson Show. He wrote a Robeson show called Mr. Robeson. And he's toured all over the world promoting Paul Robeson. A magnificent job. Someone had to do it, and someone like him is the perfect guy, you'll find out. So we're very excited that he's here. So without further ado, his name is Aluko, and he's over on a tour for the Justice for Lamar, Keith Lamar campaign. He's also here doing one show in the United States, and it's right here for you guys. So please welcome Aluko.
Thank you very much for coming. Thank you. This, as Bill said, was hastily arranged because we were trying to get something elsewhere, but it didn't work out. But the next person I thought of was Bill. And it took 2 weeks? 2 weeks. So, thank you very much. All right. So, you're looking at a picture of a man who, despite his elegant and dignified demeanor, was born on a slave plantation, probably in about 1860. His name was William Drew Robeson. At the age of 15, he escaped from Martin Plantation in Martin County, North Carolina, and ended up in Philadelphia, where he met Maria Louisa Bostille, whom he married. He went to Lincoln University, trained, I don't know whether it was there, he trained to be a minister, but became a minister in Princeton, New Jersey, where Paul Robeson was born the youngest of his 5 children, of their 5 children. On April 9th, 1898, 125 years ago tomorrow, and that was Easter time, and so Paul was an Easter child, and his family, like all Christian families all over the world, commemorate at that time the crucifixion and resurrection of Jesus Christ, and African Americans put it in a spiritual called "Were You There?" Were you there when they crucified my Lord? Sometimes it causes me to tremble, tremble, tremble. Were you there when they crucified my Lord? Were you there when he rose up from the grave? Were you there when he rose up from the grave? Sometimes it causes me to tremble, tremble, tremble. Were you there when they crucified my Lord? So Maria Louisa Bastille very tragically died in a house fire when Paul was only 5 years old. And so his father was left to raise his 5 children on his own with help from the community. But Paul's start was not very promising because for a long time his father, they lived in abject poverty. And this is a picture of him in the middle, I don't know, I think with fellow school kids at Summerfield, in New Jersey. But Paul was brilliant and managed to win a scholarship to a very prestigious entirely white school except for him, called Rutgers College, which is now Rutgers University. And he excelled there as academically, becoming, winning a Phi Beta Kappa. I'm sorry, I'm British, so I don't understand this. Skull and Cap Society, Honor Society, right? And on the sports field as well, where he was a very highly regarded footballer, in fact an All-American footballer in 1917 and 18. He then qualified, he then graduated and went to Columbia University to study law and qualified as a lawyer and worked for a short while in a New York firm. he was put at the back of the office, and never allowed to see clients because it was an all-white firm. He got the job because I believe the head of that firm was a Rutgers alumnus. But on the side, Paul would coach football, he would sing, he would act, and then one day in his law firm, he asked the secretary to take some dictation, and she said, "I don't take dictation from English." And his new wife, Eslanda Good, S.E. Robeson, and he decided that he would try for a career on the stage and be a singer. And he became quite successful quite quickly. And in 1925, he teamed up with a pianist called Lawrence Brown, and one of the highlights of his early career was having a concert at in Greenwich Village, entirely made up of Negro spirituals. Perhaps the most beautiful, in my opinion, being this one, which you all know. And Paul Robeson's burgeoning acting career took him to England, first in 1923, and then in 1928 when he starred in Showboat, from which Old Man River comes. And that is the show that launched him onto the international stage. And he and Essie, Paul more so than Essie, lived in England for many, many years in the 20s and 30s. And there is no part of the United Kingdom that I have taken my play to where somebody doesn't say to me, oh, my father and grandfather said they went to a big concert in the biggest venue in that part of, whether it's Wales, Scotland, Ireland, England. Paul Robeson had been there in the 30s and 40s. And so he had a very, very successful concert career. And in 1931, he starred in Othello for the first time professionally in London at, I don't remember the name of the theatre, but opposite him was Dame Peggy Ashcroft. That was her first professional role at the age of 24 or something. And she became one of Britain's biggest acting stars. So Paul Robeson's concert career was made up of everything from spirituals to folk songs to English songs like this one, which was composed by somebody called Edward Purcell, I believe. Yeah. It's called Passing By. It's a kind of love song.
Lady sweet and kind, was never a face so pleased my mind. I did but see her passing by, and yet I love her till her gestures, motions, and her smile, her wit, her voice, my heart beguile my heart, I know not why, and yet I love till I die. Cupid is winged and doth range a country, so my love doth change. But change my heart, or change the sky, yet will I love till I die.
Bravo.
Now something quite dramatic happened to Paul Robeson while he was performing in Showboat in 1928. He met a group of Welsh miners. They had walked all the way from Wales to London to highlight their plight, and what was happening was that they were being exploited in the mines of Wales. And Paul heard them singing on the street one night and was attracted by this music and went over to them, spoke to them, and that was like an epiphany, because in his experience and to his mind, exploitation of one people by another was of black people by white people. But these are white people also being exploited by white people. So that was Paul Robeson's introduction to socialism. And from then on, he built a very strong bond with the Welsh people and with working class people all over the world. He first started going to the Soviet Union in 1934 and got involved with the British Labour Party, people who were communists, and carried on with his career alongside his growing world awareness. And he actually enrolled at the School of Oriental and African Studies in London, SOAS, part of the University of London, and studied languages and linguistics there. And while he was there, he met Africans for the first time. Many of those would become leaders of countries after independence. Jomo Kenyatta, Nnamdi Azikiwe. He met Jawaharlal Nehru of India as well. Somebody else whose name escapes me. But living away from the United States was just a complete eye-opener to Paul. But his growing socialism made him even more interested in learning ordinary folk songs of ordinary people. And one of the songs that he learned was from Somerset in southwest England. It was called, oh no, okay. Yes, it wasn't sounding right. So one of the songs that he learned was Welsh. I'm not going to sing it in Welsh. But his relationship with the Welsh was so strong that he actually made a film in Wales with the Welsh miners. It was called Proud Valley. And during that film, the miners were going for a big competition in London. And here he is singing, probably at the Royal Albert Hall.
Fiery days never mocking man's feeble sight. Darkness eve by evil locking, heaven's casket bright. Thence my burdened spirit borrows strength to meet laborious morrows, starry peace to soothe his sorrows all through the night. Planet after planet sparkling all through the night. Down on earth this is the darkening, shed faithful light. In our mortal days declining, may our souls as calmly shining cheer the restless and repining till lost in sight.
Thank you. Paul had a dual career in the British Isles, in Europe, and in the United States, and he would travel back and forth. By now, he and Essie had a child, Paul Jr., who'd been born in 1926, and he became a superstar, so big and so successful that that's a picture of the miners in Proud Valley. So the story was basically he was like a regular miner, and there was a disaster, and he ended up being the hero. And this is him and Essie and Paul Jr. at the mansion in Enfield, Connecticut. This would probably be in the late 1930s. So far you can see that Paul's career was blooming and very nice, very pretty songs. One very nice one is Oh No John No, which is a folk song from southwest England, Somerset. Obviously, my voice is nothing like Paul Robeson's. The bottom of the voice is nowhere near as deep as his. So I use my talents in other ways. So, Oh No John.
answer yes or no. My father was a Spanish captain who went to see a mother go. First he kissed me, then he lived, made me always answer no. Oh, John, 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 no. Oh, madam, in your face is beauty, on your lips red roses grow. Will you take me for your lover? Madam, answer yes or no. Oh, no, John, no, John, no. Oh, madam, I will give you jewels. I will make you rich and free. I will give you silken dresses. Madam, will you marry me? Oh, John, no, John, no, John, no. Oh, madam, since you are so cruel, and that you do scorn me so, if I may not be your lover, madam, will you let me go? Oh, no, John, no, John, no. Then I will stay with you forever, if you will not be unkind. I will always love you, madam. Will you have me change my mind? Oh, no, John, no, John, no. Oh, hark, I hear the church bells ringing. Will you come and be my wife? Oh, dear madam, have you settled to live single all your life? Oh, no, John, no, John, no, John, no.
Thank you. So, pretty songs, nice songs, nothing to worry the world about. But Paul Robeson was getting increasingly political, so much so that in 1937 we found him the Spanish Civil War, singing for Abraham Lincoln Brigade. And then Call Mr. Robeson is a play that I have been performing since 2007 actually, but I started touring with it in 2008. And how do you get the life of a man like this onto stage? Because when I read his biography, I thought this is a story that has to be told. Better told on stage as a piece of drama than a lecture or a concert. Maybe you can combine a lecture and a concert, but a play is even better. So for instance, I said, I got to a stage where everywhere I went, my concerts were packed. I remember singing one night in Kansas City, sometime in 1942, in Municipal Auditorium.
Way down on the snowy river, far, far away. There's where my heart is turning ever. There's where the old folks stay. All around and sad and dreary, everywhere I roam. Oh, my heart grows. Excuse me, ladies and gentlemen. I have been going around this country for several years now. And everywhere I have been, I have campaigned tirelessly for equal rights for my people, for our integration at all levels of society. I have also insisted that I will not sing to segregated audiences. I thought that that had been understood by the management of this auditorium when this concert was arranged. But I see that their pledge has not been honored, because we have white people down here and Negro people up there. And for this reason, I'm afraid I have to say that this concert is now over. Well, eventually I calmed down and I decided to go back out there, but I lay it down straight. I see that Jim Crow is alive and well in Kansas City tonight, and you know my views. However, I feel that my people upstairs, who have paid good, hard-earned money to hear me sing tonight, must not be disappointed. And therefore, I will continue with this concert, but for their sake only. And let there be no doubt that I'm continuing only under protest. I will therefore sing for my people upstairs songs of our people's struggle. For we have resisted hundreds of years of slavery, but continue to fight injustice, continue to be forced to battle to preserve our dignity. Oh yes, sir, madam, you may leave if you wish. Be sure to ask for a refund in the way out. Larry, Battle of Jericho. Just in the battle of Jericho, Jericho, Jericho. Just in the battle of Jericho, and the walls come tumbling down. You may talk about your king of Gideon, you may talk about your man of Saul. There's none like the good old Joshua at the battle of Jericho. Up to the walls of Jericho, he marched with sword in hand. Don't blow them ram, as Joshua cried, as the battle hand in hand. Then the lamb shemals begin to blow, the trumpets begin to sound. Joshua commanded the children to shout, and the walls come tumbling down. That's morning, Joshua in the battle of Jericho. So that was 1942, Kansas City. Probably the first time that sort of thing had happened. We've heard about it more often since. In 1949, Paul was on tour in Europe, and he was in Paris for the Peace Conference. He actually went there because he heard it was on. He took time off his tour and went there, and he just went there as a delegate. He was spotted and was invited to come and make a speech. And in that speech, he said to the words to the effect that why should African Americans go to war against the Soviet Union? I've been to the Soviet Union many times, and me and my fellow African Americans feel like real human beings in the Soviet Union, whilst in our own country, United States, we are treated as second-class citizens. And that speech was distorted, and by the time he got back to the United States, he had become, all of a sudden, from being the most famous American on the planet, an extremely popular entertainer, he was suddenly public enemy number one. On that same tour, he was in Moscow, and another very important thing happened to him.
over the years when he had been going there, he'd made a lot of Jewish friends. His wife was partly Jewish. His son married a Jewish woman. He grew up speaking Yiddish because of the area of New Jersey that he grew up in. His father gave sermons in Yiddish, taught him Hebrew. But when Paul went to Moscow, all his Jewish friends were missing. Couldn't figure out what was going on. Eventually one was brought to his hotel room. He'd been cleaned up, brought out of the prison he'd been in. His name was Itzhak Pfeffer. Itzhak came to the hotel room. They felt that the room might be bugged, so they carried on a conversation talking about family and weather and stuff, meanwhile writing notes to each other. And Itzhak Pfeffer told him that we Jews are being persecuted. This person is in this gulag, this person has been killed. Me, I think I'm going to be killed. This is the first time Paul heard about all this, and it was on the final night of his tour. And he had a concert that night, and he sang normal songs in English, in Russian, other languages, and got to the end of the concert and a rousing ovation, standing ovation, and then he asked for quiet. And we have this on tape. And he speaks to the audience in fluent Russian, saying something like, I would like to finish one last song. I would like to dedicate it to my Jewish friends. I've made many Jewish friends over the years. And I'm reminded that their struggle is like the struggle of the Negro people. And he then sings a song in Yiddish, Zobnit Kaimo. And it's on there. Not yet. So it was during this same tour that he made that Paris Speech Conference, and when he got back to the United States in August, he was due to give an outdoor concert in Peekskill, upstate New York. But the veterans, the Klan, the police were not going to let it happen. And so this is the kind of reception that not just Paul Robeson had, but the crowd that went to meet him. So this is the people of Peekskill letting them know that they were not welcome. Even the troopers, what do you call them? The state patrol? State police. Yes, they let that happen. So the concert that was scheduled to happen August 27th had to be abandoned. Paul Robeson never even made it to the venue. But they went back September the 4th. And this time the trade unions had decided to send men and some women, I expect, to guard Paul Robeson while he was on stage. So you had this ring of people standing around Paul Robeson. Each of them, in fact, I heard that they drew a ballot because everybody wanted to be the person there to stand around Paul Robeson. They'd heard that there might be snipers in the hills. They said, we are here to guard you. And there was an even bigger ring around the crowd in the car parks. And then the concert happened. Pete Seeger was one of the people that sang, and Woody Guthrie and others. But after the concert, there was another riot. And people had their cars damaged, people were injured, one person lost an eye. So it was, so that was definitely the beginning of the end of Paul Robeson's career. So in this particular pair of concerts, I feel that around Paul Robeson, we saw the United States come as close to fascism as it ever came until the few years ago. So there was anti-black racism, there was anti-communism, and anti-Semitism, all around this one man and this concert, because he was talking about his people being second-class citizens and not wanting to go to war against the Soviet Union. I think that particular Peekskill is a piece of American history that is so fundamental that it's unknown as far as I could tell, largely unknown. So I've actually written an audio play about it called Paul Robeson's Love Song. Oh, what happened there? I should say Paul Robeson's Love Song, an audio play by Aluko. And yeah, it's online. And in that play, one of the songs that I sing is that Yiddish song, Zog mit Kaimal, which I shall sing one verse in Yiddish and the others in English. There'll be 3 verses in all, but it's amazing how the words, Yiddish words, could have been written by African Americans.
Sag nicht einmal, als du geist am letzten Weg, als schimmeln bleien, verstellen bläue Tag, kommen wird noch unser ausgebänkte Show, später heut und unser Gott wird seinen Lohn. Kommen wird noch unser ausgebänkte Show, später heut und unser Gott wird seinen Lohn. Never say that you have reached the very end, when land and skies a bitter future may portend. For sure the hour for which we yearn will yet arrive, and our marching steps will thunder we survive. For sure the hour for which we yearn will yet arrive, and our marching steps will thunder we survive. Not lead, but blood inscribed this bitter song we sing. It's not a caroling of birds upon the wing, but 'twas a people midst the crashing fires of hell that sang this song and fought courageous till it fell. But 'twas a people midst the crashing fires of hell that sang this song and fought courageous till it fell.
So that song was one of several songs that Paul Robeson was forced to record in secret, because after Peekskill, record companies closed their doors to him, venues closed their doors to him. They were threatened that if they hosted a Paul Robeson concert, they would have their licenses withdrawn. He couldn't travel. His passport was cancelled in 1950 because it was said by the State Department that Paul Robeson's travel abroad at this time would not be conducive to the best interest of the United States. So this was this is the man whose life story I just sort of happened upon. The story of how it happened is also, it's maybe of interest. So I grew up in Nigeria in a very privileged family. At the age of 16, I was sent to a boarding school in England because my parents felt that you need the best education that money can buy. we didn't have that much money, but my brother, who was 3 years older than me, had won a scholarship to this school in the south of England called Bryanston School. So when it came to my turn, I was the youngest of 6. Paul was the youngest of 5. My parents decided to send me, and so I went to this almost entirely white school in the south of England. I was one of 4 black boys. It was a mixed school. I'd gone from a boys' boarding school in Lagos to a mixed boarding school in England. I have this distinct memory of seeing this girl go across there, and seeing the same girl go across, and realizing after a while that these people all look alike. But you know, I became used to these people. So I finished there, and then I went to study architecture. I trained as an architect and ended up at Liverpool University and started working for myself. And then I was known as a singer, and there was this event happening to welcome the dawn on the summer solstice. Summer solstice, it was called the Dawn Chorus, and they asked me to sing a song. We haven't done this. You know My Lord, What a Morning? Okay. I chose an appropriate song.
My Lord, what a morning. My Lord, what a morning. My Lord, what a morning. When the stars begin to fall, when the stars begin to fall.
I won't sing anymore because it's probably a bit high. But what happened after that was a lady came up to me and said, "You remind me of Paul Robeson. Do you sing many of his songs?" I said, "Paul Robeson? May have heard the name, but I'm not sure of his music." And then 2 months after that, that was June 21st, 1995. And 2 months after that, I was in the library in Liverpool. I don't remember what book I was looking for, and up there was a book saying Paul Robeson. I borrowed it, read it, and discovered this amazing life. And I remember I finished it on Christmas morning, 1995. It was one of the last Christmases that was, had a lot of snow. I just could not put it down. Actually, I finished at lunchtime. I stayed in bed till lunchtime to finish this. And I said, somebody has to tell this story. And then 10 years later, after looking for playwrights, because I'd never written a play before, I decided to have a go myself. And that has brought me here. I'll tell you how I came across Keith. I did another show about Langston Hughes, which is not a play, it's a tribute. I recite his poetry and perform his prose, and I sing some jazz songs. And I was doing this in Northeast England once, and a woman came up to me afterwards and said, "I have a friend who loves Langston Hughes. He's a prisoner on death row in Ohio. He would love to hear from you." And it took me 3 years to summon up the courage to write to Keith Lamar. Because what can you write to a man who is on death row? What can you say? Oh, I'm on tour here and there, I'm enjoying life, but it took me 3 years, and then I finally wrote to him, and he wrote back. And that was, I don't remember how long ago that was, maybe about 8, 9 years ago now. And I found out this story, which is a shocking story, but unfortunately, it's not unique in the sense that here is somebody who is amazing, brilliant, and innocently on death row. And so I have joined a number of people in doing what we can to support him, to highlight his case. Hello.
Tayo, how you doing, brother?
I'm doing very well, Keith. Good to hear your voice.
Good,
How are
good.
you?
Glad to hear. I'm good. Glad you made it, man. I'm so excited to see you next week.
Yes. Yeah, we'll be seeing each other next Thursday, right? Yeah, we've spoken a few
Yeah,
times,
that's
but
right.
we've never met. So
Yeah, that's right.
I am at the Carr Center in Detroit, and I have an audience of about 70 people looking at your picture and hearing your voice. So why don't you tell them about yourself?
Oh, okay. Hello, everybody. I'm sure Tayo has told you at least a little about me. He and I have been communicating with each other a little over a year now. Still a mutual friend, and he has, become a part of my campaign. I am right now waiting to be executed by the state of Ohio. Well, I shouldn't say that I'm waiting. I'm actually fighting to prevent my execution from happening. And in that effort, we started a campaign. I wrote a book back in 2013. A documentary soon followed. A CD was just released. Freedom First CD was just released about a year ago. And we've been doing music all over the country, all over the world. But now we're waiting to kind of spread my the injustice that I underwent through the criminal justice system. And so we've been trying in every way possible to get the word out, to educate people, not just about my case, because obviously I'm just one of many who are being subjected to this injustice. But I'm one of the lucky few who has an incredible group of people in my circle of friends. Tayo is one of those people, and we together have been trying to, speak up and speak out, and bring to people's awareness the inequities of the system, the irregularities of the system, and how it's, centrally focused on primarily black and brown people. And so that's what we've been doing, and I've been reading with young people in various places, juvenile facilities, college students, high school students, because I truly believe that those who are coming behind are the only ones who could really rectify some of the dangers and detriments that we have caused. And so I'm trying to do my part, not only to save my own life, but to also give life and help save some of the young people who are coming behind. So that's my story in a nutshell, and what I've been trying to do for those of you who have the time and feel inclined. There's a show tomorrow. I think Tayo has the information where you all can come and see for yourself or hear for yourself what I'm talking about, what we've been doing, me with this amazing group of people. But yeah, pretty amazing.
Thank you, Keith. Now, you talked about doing work with young people. You have a book club, is that correct? Can you talk about it?
That's right, yes. Native Son Literacy Project, named after one of my mentors, my literary mentors, Richard Wright, who wrote a book called Native Sons, also a book called Black Boy. Yeah, so he's been a big inspiration to me in my life. And so I named my book club in homage to him and his contribution. Yeah.
That's great. And so you reach out to kids, you reach out from death row, from solitary confinement, you reach out all over the world. You've done Carnegie Hall a few weeks ago, is that right?
Yeah, about a month ago now, in collaboration with a musician named Moore Pinchue, we were able to go to Carnegie Hall, believe it or not, and share some of the music and poetry, spoken word that I've cultivated over these many years of being living in the dark. And so, yeah, you know, the book club, everything that I'm doing, as I said, has a two-pronged purpose. You know, to not only speak truth to my own personal situation, but to also provide life for those who are coming behind, particularly young people who are coming the path that I took to find my way to myself. You know, because it's so dark, it's so dense, it's so dangerous that you need life. If you don't have life, you can't really make it, you know, to where you need to be. Yeah. So I'm trying to do my part. Yes, definitely.
That's great. And so one of the things that you've been doing with the musicians is you recite some poetry, and you're going to do some of that for us tonight.
Yeah, I'm going to do one of my favorite poems by a Turkish poet named Nazim Hikmet. It's a poem that has particular resonance for me in my life and centered me, you know, in terms of my attitude. And so it's a song that I committed to memory. I hope I'm able to, you know, remember all the words tonight. I get nervous sometimes, but I think it'll be okay. Yeah.
And we have on piano with me tonight Bill Meyer, a wonderful jazz pianist from here in Detroit, and he's the reason we're here. So he's going to accompany you now. So take it away.
Okay, thanks, Tayo. Living is no laughing matter. You must live with great seriousness, like a squirrel for that. I mean, without looking for something beyond and above living. I mean, living must be your whole life. Living is no laughing matter. You must take it seriously. So much so into such a degree that, for example, your hands tied behind your back. Your back to the wall. Or from the laboratory, your white coat and safety glasses. You can die for people. Even for people whose faces you've never seen, even though you know living is the most real, the most beautiful thing. I mean, you must take living so seriously. You plant olive trees. And not for your children either. But although you fear death, you don't believe it because living, I mean, weighs heavier. Let's say we're seriously ill, need surgery. Which is to say we might not get up from the white table. I know it's impossible not to feel sad about going a little too soon. We'll still laugh at the jokes being told. We'll look out the window to see if it's raining, or still wait anxiously for the latest newscast. Let's say we're at the front for something worth fighting for, say. This first offensive on that very day, we might fall on our face dead. We'll know this for the serious anger. But we'll still worry ourselves to death about the outcome of the war, which could last years. Let's say we're in prison, close to 50. And we still have 18 more years, say, before the iron doors will open. We still live with the outside. But it's people and animals struggle and win. I mean, the outside beyond the walls. I mean, however and wherever we are, we must live as if we would never die. This earth will grow cold. A star among stars and one of the smallest. A gilded mold on blue velvet. I mean, this, our great earth, this earth will grow cold one day and fight. Not like a block of ice, but like a dead cloud either, but like an empty water, it will float along in pitch black space. You have to breathe for this now. You have to feel this sorrow now. For the world must be loved this much if we're going to say, I live. know, this is our one and only life, the only life we have. We should live it to the fullest, with love, with peace, collaborate with each other to find our way forward. Because this earth will grow cold one day. Star amongst stars, and one of the smallest. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Keith. I'm sure we'll get some people here to sign up to your campaign and find out more about you. I actually have some of your books out there as well, so they'll know more. And, get in touch with you. Yeah. See you Thursday.
Okay, thanks, brother. Okay, good night, everybody. Piano player, you did great, man. That was beautiful. I love that. Thanks so much. Give it up for the piano player, everybody.
Thank you. See you Thursday. Thank you, Amy.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye. Okay.
Wow, that's it.
Okay. Right, so back to Paul Robeson. I told you that his passport, so that's where Keith is going to be, that's where I'm going to be part of, he asked me to write a monologue for him at the beginning of this concert with jazz musicians, a whole jazz band. So he'll be reading some poetry, there'll be other poets. So I'll do a monologue at the beginning and at the end. And we're going on a tour of also to Ohio and Illinois. And the details are on the website. And on my website too, which you'll see at the end. Okay, so Paul Robeson. I told you that his passport was cancelled in 1950. And it took him 8 years for him to get it back. Now, even back then in 1950, American citizens didn't need passports to travel to Canada. But a law was made specifically for Paul Robeson that if he crossed that border, he would be arrested. And so, starting in 1952, he did a series of 3 or 4 concerts at the border between Washington State and British Columbia. And there he is. And the first time 25,000 people showed up on the Canadian side and 5,000 behind him in the United States. That in itself says a lot about the fear that he generated behind him. And as I said before, he couldn't record, couldn't perform live. His income went down from about $100,000 a year in the 1930s to about $6,000 in the mid-50s. He could have got his passport back and started touring if he said what they wanted him to say, that he was a communist and to give names. But he wasn't going to do that. And one of the things that he did, his son Paul Jr. was an electronics engineer, and so they recorded a number of albums secretly in the basement of Paul's brother's church, the Mother AME Zion in Harlem. And these tapes were smuggled out of the country, and 4 albums were made and pressed in England, GDR, Czechoslovakia, and I don't remember where the 4th one was. And some of the recordings are quite rare. And the rarest, and to me the most beautiful and most poignant, is this next one, which is called Little Girl of Hiroshima.
This little girl is at your door, at every door, at every door. And I am she who cannot see. I'm at your door, at every door. I'm at your door, at every door. And for this child will never be that love and laughter you have known. At Hiroshima, don't you see? My flesh was seared from every bone. My flesh was seared from every bone. My hair was burning, feel the flame. Hot were my poor eyes, hot my hands. Now just a trace of ash remains where I had played on smiling sands. Stranger, what can you do for me? This little ash, this little girl, this human child like paper burned, dry ash the cooling winds shall swirl, dry ash the cooling winds shall swirl. This little maiden seared by strife, oh stranger, please do this for me. Your name for mankind's peace and life, and peace and life for all like me, and peace and life for all like me.
Finally, 8 years later, Paul Robeson was back touring again. And his first concert was at Carnegie Hall, sold out within days. And from that stage, he was able to announce that his passport was back and he would go on tour. And he left the United States as quickly as he could. And the first place he went to sing at was in Abervale in Wales, at Miners Eisteddfod. They'd been waiting for him for years. And so he went to Wales, he toured England, he toured Europe, Went to Jamaica. One of the places he went to was Sydney, Australia, and he went to the building site of the Sydney Opera House, and he sang to the workers there, and he sang Joe Hill. And there is footage online about this. This was in 1960. In 1963, he was on stage at the Royal Shakespeare Company in Stratford-on-Avon, playing Othello again, opposite Sam Wanamaker as Iago. So this was an intensive tour, 5 years. After, even while he was still in the United States, he'd begun to suffer bouts of ill health physically and ill health mentally. And he actually broke down on tour in Moscow. Paul Jr. was convinced that Paul had been drugged with LSD, and which induced him, made him attempt suicide. He slashed his wrist in a Moscow hotel bedroom. In East Germany, he fell ill again and was hospitalized. He was in hospital in London, where he received electric shock treatment. Paul Jr. was also convinced that he was given stronger doses and more doses than necessary, probably on instruction from the CIA in a bid to neutralize him. Meanwhile, the civil rights movement was going on back home in the United States, but he was not a part of it. And he finally returned in 1963 and spent the last 12 years of his life being looked after by his sister, Marianne Forsyth, in Philadelphia. And then he died on January 20th, 1976, January 23rd, 1976. And on his gravestone is part of a speech that he made in London in 1937, speaking on behalf of the Republicans, not Republicans here, but people who were aiming for a Spanish Republic, who were fighting against the fascist regime of General Franco. Said the artist must take sides. He must elect to fight for freedom or slavery. I have made my choice. I had no alternative. But by the time he died, he'd almost been forgotten. His name was, people, I remember being in Dearborn the first year I met you, 2008, at a labor conference. And I gave a presentation, and afterwards I went to this group of black trade unionists, and I said, I'm sorry you missed my presentation of Paul Robeson. One of them said, who's Paul Robeson? He's the black trade unionist. And nowadays, sometimes when you hear somebody, Paul Robeson, oh, he was a commie, wasn't he? And that's all they know about him. So there's a song about that, another spiritual, called Scandalize My Name. I met my brother the other day. I gave him my right hand, and just as soon as ever my back was turned, he scandalized my name. Do you call that a brother? Oh no. You call that a brother? Oh no. You call that a brother? Oh what is Paul Robeson's legacy? Well, the kind of thing that he did when he was alive, despite being a very successful artist, was he would go on marches for the workers. He would support anti-imperialist struggles around the world. And so when we see today, or I would say that he actually laid the path for those who would come behind him. The March for Jobs, Dr. King and others. So he laid that path before. And the path that they trod, we follow today. These go back to Paul Robeson and the people who he acknowledged, people like Frederick Douglass, Ida Wells, Harriet Tubman, and so on. So he is part of this tradition of what we must continue to do. And his favorite song actually was not Old Man River, but one which was written about a trade unionist who had emigrated to the United States from Scandinavia. His name was Joe Hill, and he was a very effective trade unionist, an organizer for the industrial workers of the world. Particularly effective because he was a songwriter, and he used music to rouse the workers to sing. And he was so effective that they needed to get rid of him. And he was framed for murder and executed in Utah in 1917. And it is said that when he was standing there waiting to be executed and the workers were standing in front of him, he said to them, "Don't mourn, organize." So this is Joe Hill. And join in if you wish. I dreamed I saw Joe Hill last night, alive as you and me. Says I, but Joe, you're 10 years dead. I never died, says he. I never died, says he. Salt Lake Joe, by Jove, I says, him standing by my bed. They framed you on a murder charge, says Joe, but I ain't dead. Says Joe, but I ain't dead. The copper bosses killed you, Joe. They shot you, Joe, says I. Takes more than guns to kill a man, says Joe, I didn't die. Says Joe, I didn't die. And standing there as big as life and smiling with his eyes, he says those they forgot to kill went on to organize. Went on to organize. Joe Hill ain't dead, he says to me. Joe Hill ain't never died. Where working folk defend their rights, Joe Hill is at their side. Joe Hill is at their side. From San Diego to Detroit, in every mine and mill, where working folk are out on strike, that's where you'll find Joe Hill. That's where you'll find Joe Hill. I dreamed I saw
Big Paul last night, alive as you and me. But Paul, says I, you're 10 years dead. I never died, says he. I never died, says he. Spirituals that Paul inherited from his people that he passed on to us can be said to exist in some of our more recent music, maybe not quite today, but this particular song was changed during the civil rights movement. I think at this point I will dedicate it to the memory of Paul Robeson's first girlfriend before Islanda. Her name was Jerry Neal. And in my play I say there was somebody else before I met S.E. Jerry Neal, her name was. We met while I was at Rutgers College in New Jersey, and she was teacher training at Trenton. I asked her to marry me several times. She thought about it for a long time, but eventually she said, you know, I don't think I'm strong enough to marry Paul Robeson. Something about you tells me that I'd be marrying nothing but trouble. If only she had been able to hold on. Wanna get to heaven, I'll tell you how. Keep your hand on the gospel plow. Keep your hand on the plow. Hold on. Keep on plowing until you tire. Every rung goes higher and higher. Keep your hand on the plow. Hold on. Hold on, keep your hand on the plow, hold on. Paul and Silas bound in jail, had no money for to go their bed. Keep your eyes on the prize, hold on. Paul and Silas started to shout, jail doors open and walk on out. Keep your eyes on the prize, hold on. Hold on, keep your eyes on the prize, hold on. One thing that
Lawyers University now, a small, you wouldn't call it a monument, a small plaza was unveiled in Paul Robeson's honor, and I had to be there. I was there, and that was the 100th anniversary of his graduation. And somebody whose name had been taken off the rolls because of his, because he was public enemy #1, has now finally been properly recognized. And this is a picture from that event. And that's the plaza. So there are pictures of Paul Robeson in his finery, but this, I would argue, is part of his legacy. A young black boy learning about Paul Robeson, dressed in a shirt with Colin Kaepernick on his back. So that's his legacy, and I do another play called Just an Ordinary Lawyer, and it's about Britain's first black judge who was a Nigerian who loved to sing, who loved to play cricket, but is inspired by that great gesture by the African American athletes at the 1968 Olympics, who inspired people like Colin Kaepernick, who were themselves inspired arguably by Paul Robeson. And so Paul Robeson's legacy is one of struggle, one of protest. And his song Old Man River, written for Showboat, talks about this river of life just going on while bad things are happening, and it's paying no heed. But I would argue that he calls on us to keep that legacy of protest going on and on. So I'm going to attempt to sing Old Man River, which is a difficult song for a baritone to sing. But here we go.
There's an old man called the Mississippi. That's the old man I don't like to be. What does he care if the world's got troubles? What does he care if the land ain't free? Don't look up and don't look down. You don't just make the white horse frown. Bend your knees and bow your head and pull that rope until you're dead. Let me go away from your Jordan. Let me go away from the white man boss. Show me that stream called the River Jordan. That's the old stream that I long to cross. He must know something, but don't say nothing. He just keeps rolling. He keeps on rolling along. He don't plant taters. He don't plant cotton. And then that plants them is soon forgotten. But old man laughing instead of crying. I must keep fighting until I'm dying. But old man River, he just keeps I have one more song. And this is something to do with Paul Robeson that people don't know much about. I don't know if any of you here may know this. Camp Chica. You want to say anything about it, ma'am?
I went to Campo Chico when I was about 7.
Oh, wow.
Wochica means Workers' Children's Camp. And it was filled with music of people like Paul Robeson and Pete Seeger and many others who came to teach the songs and to give strength to children whose parents were being oppressed.
Yes. You do not look old enough, is the first thing I have to say. Because it was in the 1930s, I thought.
No, it was
Okay.
in the 40s.
Okay, 40s. And it was workers' children, so you know, it was probably the only camp that you didn't have to earn a lot of money to be able to go to. It was the first integrated camp in the country, and it was a socialist camp, and Paul Robeson was a regular visitor. That was the highlight of the did you meet him there?
I met him later in life at a demonstration in Washington, D.C.
Anyway, this next song, I think, is very apt if we are looking to the future, because the people who run our societies today, with their preoccupation with war, which is only perpetrated because there is money to be made in war. It's like a game to them. But this song, I think, is a good antidote to that. And this picture just shows how much Paul was adored by the children in the camp. And I can picture him singing this song, and I'm thinking not about the children, but about the men children who like to go to war. If they listen to this song, maybe we'll have some hope. Evening breeze is sighing, moon is in the sky. Little man, it's time for bed. you once right away. Better go to sleep now, little man, you've had a busy day. You've been playing soldiers, the battle has been won, the enemy is out of sight. Come along now, soldier, put away your gun, the war is over for tonight. Time to stop your scheming, time your day was through. Can't you hear the bugle softly say, time you should be dreaming, little man, you've had a busy day.